Willie Nelson walked to the center of the stage and stopped. He did not sit down. He did not adjust the microphone. He did not reach for the guitar that was waiting for him on its stand, the old battered one with the hole worn through the top, and the name written on the body in the handwriting of people who loved him. The guitar that has been in more rooms and on more stages than most musicians see in a lifetime. He simply stood in the center of the stage in the light and looked out at the audience with the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere and is taking a moment before he begins, except that the moment kept going, and the band behind him exchanged a look, and Jimmy Fallon, who had just introduced him with the particular reverence you use when introducing someone who does not need an introduction, stood at the side of the stage and did not understand what he was watching. Willie Nelson looked at the guitar on its stand. He looked at the audience. He looked at something in the fourth row that no one else could see. And then he set down his guitar pick on the edge of the stage, carefully, with 2 fingers, as though placing something that mattered on a surface that could be trusted with it. Jimmy Fallon took 1 step forward. 300 people in that studio went completely silent. It was a Tuesday night taping. April 2024. The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon. Willie Nelson was the musical guest. He was 90 years old. He had been invited to play 2 songs from a new record, the kind of booking the production team regards as an event rather than a slot, the kind of appearance that people on the crew mention to their families before it happens. He had arrived at the studio in the afternoon for sound check, moving with the unhurried ease of a man for whom the act of arriving on a stage is as natural as the act of waking up, something the body does without requiring the mind's instruction. He was thin and deliberate, his white hair in the 2 braids he has worn for decades, and he carried the guitar the way he has always carried it. Not in a case, not handled by anyone else, held at his side by the neck the way you carry something that belongs to your body rather than to the world. The sound check had run normally. He had played a few bars of each song, nodded to the band, said something to the sound engineer that made the sound engineer laugh. Everything had been right. The taping began. The show ran through its first segments. Willie Nelson waited in the green room with the guitar across his knee, the way he has waited in green rooms for 70 years, comfortable in the particular silence of someone who has made his peace with waiting, because waiting has always led to the same place, the stage. Jimmy Fallon said his name. The audience responded the way audiences respond to Willie Nelson, which is with the warmth of people greeting someone who belongs to the soundtrack of their lives, someone woven into the specific fabric of decades of living so thoroughly that losing him would mean losing something about themselves. He walked out. He reached the center of the stage. He stopped. He set down the pick. The entire studio froze. The band had their instruments ready. The lights were arranged for a performance. The cameras were on the marks for a musical segment. Everything in the room was configured for one thing, and the man at the center of it was doing something else, something that had no place in any rundown, and the room did not know how to receive it. 300 people who had been warm and applauding 30 seconds before sat without moving. The applause had died the moment Willie Nelson stopped. Because an audience always knows before it knows, the body registers the wrongness before the mind has named it, and the body's first response is to go quiet and wait. Jimmy Fallon stood at the side of the stage. He did not approach. He did not signal to a producer. He looked at Willie Nelson's face and he understood, without being able to say how, that what was happening was not a problem to be solved. Willie Nelson looked at the 4th row for a long time. Then he picked up the guitar. He did not sit. He did not go to the microphone. He stood in the center of the stage with the guitar held in both hands, not in playing position, just held, and he said something. He said it quietly, but the studio microphones caught it. Because in a room that's silent, even a quiet thing carries. He said, "This one's for Mac." And then he sat down, and then he played. 300 people held their breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1969. Willie Nelson wasn't always Willie Nelson. Outlaw country legend, American treasure, the man with the guitar that has more miles on it than most people's cars and more songs in it than most people's lives. In the spring of 1969, he was 36 years old, and not yet the thing he would become. He had been writing songs for years that other people made famous. Crazy for Patsy Cline, Hello Walls for Farron Young, Nightlife that became a standard without making him one. He was a songwriter who performed, and a performer who was not yet a star, working the circuit with the particular stubbornness of a man who has decided that the road is preferable to the alternative and has arranged his life accordingly. He had a guitar he had been playing since 1969. A Martin N20 classical guitar he had bought from a fellow musician named Shot Jackson for $50. He had not bought it because it was special. He had bought it because it was there, and it was $50, and he needed a guitar, and this was a guitar. It was a nylon string classical instrument, not built for the kind of playing he did, not built for steel strings, not built for the road. He put steel strings on it anyway. He played it the way he played everything, without asking it permission, without adjusting his approach to accommodate its preferences, simply demanding that it become what he needed it to be. The guitar became what he needed it to be. He named it Trigger, after Roy Rogers' horse, because of course he did. By the mid-1970s, Trigger had a hole worn through the soundboard from decades of Willie Nelson's right arm moving across it in the particular windmill motion that is as much a signature as the braids or the bandana. The hole was not a structural catastrophe. The guitar still played, still sang, still carried everything he asked of it. But it was a wound, and wounds accumulate. And by 1980, Trigger had enough accumulated wear that people who understood guitars began to look at it with the expression of someone watching something they love approach a limit. Willie Nelson did not replace it. He could not replace it. Not because no other guitar would have played as well. Some would have played better. But because Trigger was not a guitar anymore. Or not only a guitar, it was a record of where he had been. The signatures on the body were the signatures of everyone who had meant something. The hole in the soundboard was 40 years of him being himself in public. The wear and the weather and the travel were all in it, the way experience is in a face, and you do not replace a face because it is aged. He took it to luthiers when it needed attention. Most of them understood immediately what they were looking at, and treated the repair with the seriousness it deserved. In 1990, a bridge problem took him to a small workshop in Nashville. A one-room operation above a hardware store on a street that smelled of sawdust and linseed oil, run by a man named Mac Caldwell. Mac Caldwell was 63 years old. He had been repairing guitars since he was 14, when his father, who repaired guitars before him, had put a cracked Martin in his hands and told him to figure it out. He had figured it out. He had been figuring out broken things ever since, with the particular patience of someone for whom the work itself is the reward, and the result is simply the evidence that the work was done correctly. He was not a famous man. He was not a man with a waiting list that stretched months into the future and clients who flew in from other countries. He was a man above a hardware store on a Nashville street who repaired guitars carefully and charged fair prices and loved the work with a completeness that made everything about his shop feel different from the outside, the way certain rooms feel different because the person inside them has been paying attention in the right way for a very long time. He looked at Trigger for a long time before he spoke. He turned the guitar in his hands. He looked at the hole in the soundboard. He ran one finger along the edge of it, carefully, the way you touch something old and meaningful. He looked at the signatures on the body, reading some of them, moving past others. He turned it over and looked at the back, and the sides, and the neck joint, and the way the neck sat relative to the body. Then he looked at Willie Nelson. He said, "Most people would have retired this guitar 15 years ago." Willie Nelson said, "I know." Mac Caldwell said, "It's not finished." He said it plainly, without drama. The way a doctor says a thing when the thing is simply true and does not require decoration. This guitar is not finished. I don't know how to explain it except to say that it still has something in it. Something that doesn't transfer. If you put it in a museum, it would be gone within a year. It needs to stay in your hands. Willie Nelson looked at him. Mac Caldwell said, "I'm going to fix the bridge. And I'm going to do some work on the neck. And then I'm going to give it back to you, and I want you to promise me something." Willie Nelson said, "What?" He said, "I want you to promise me you'll play it until one of you gives out first. Not until it seems like the right time to stop. Not until someone tells you it's too fragile. Until one of you gives out first. Because this guitar is not done telling whatever it is it's been trying to say for 20 years, and you're the only one who can hear it well enough to say it back." Willie Nelson said, "That's not a hard promise to make." Mac Caldwell said, "I know, but say it anyway." Willie Nelson said, "I promise." Mac Caldwell repaired trigger. The bridge work was exquisite, precise and unobtrusive. The repair so well matched to the original that you had to know where to look to find it. He charged Willie Nelson half what the work was worth, because he said the privilege of having the guitar in his hands for 2 weeks was worth the difference. They stayed in touch for a few years, the way people stay in touch when a repair has gone well, and there is mutual respect but no particular occasion to see each other. Then the touring picked up again, and the years moved the way years move, and the address Mac Caldwell had written in Willie Nelson's notebook stopped delivering mail, and the thread went slack in the ordinary way that threads do, when life keeps pulling both ends in different directions. Mac Caldwell kept repairing guitars above the hardware store on the Nashville street until 2018, when his hands told him it was time. He retired to a small house in Whites Creek, Tennessee, where his son Thomas lived with his family. He was 91 years old. He died in March of 2024, in the house in Whites Creek, with Thomas beside him. Thomas Caldwell had grown up hearing about Willie Nelson the way children grow up hearing about the people their parents held in particular regard, not as a celebrity, but as a specific human being who had come into the workshop once and said something that his father had been thinking about ever since. Mac Caldwell had told the story of the guitar and the promise many times. He had told it the way people tell the things that mattered, without insisting that it mattered, simply including it in the account of a life, letting it find its own level. After his father's death, Thomas had written to Willie Nelson's management. He had not asked for anything. He had said only, "My father repaired your guitar in 1990, and I thought you should know he died last March, and I thought you should know he talked about that guitar until the end." Willie Nelson had received the letter on a morning in April, reading it at a table in the tour bus with Trigger on the seat beside him. He had sat with it for a long time. He had called his manager and asked him to find Thomas Caldwell. He had asked for one thing. Behind the scenes, Willie Nelson had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He had not told The Tonight Show what he was planning to do. He had not told the band. He had arrived at the sound check that afternoon with Thomas Caldwell's seat assignment in his shirt pocket, and the knowledge that Thomas was in the 4th row, and the understanding of what he intended to say when he looked at him. which was something he had never said in public, because Mac Caldwell had never needed him to say it in public. And now Mac Caldwell was gone, and his son was in the fourth row, and the thing needed to be said where Thomas could hear it. The production team had built a musical segment. Willie Nelson had let them build it. He had not corrected the plan, because the plan would still happen. He was still going to play the two songs. He was going to play them for Thomas Caldwell and for the guitar, and for the promise he had made in a workshop above a hardware store in 1990. But he was going to do something first. Something No Rundown had space for. He was going to stand in the center of the stage and look at the fourth row until he was ready. Now the studio understood the stillness it had witnessed. Willie Nelson had stood at the center of the stage with Trigger in its place on the stand and looked at Thomas Caldwell in the fourth row and taken the time he needed, because some things deserve to be approached slowly, and this was one of them. The set-down pick had not been a malfunction or a hesitation. It had been a man setting aside the instrument of his work for a moment so that the moment could be only itself, before the work resumed. He had picked the guitar back up. He was playing now. Jimmy Fallon came from the side of the stage and sat on the edge of the desk, which he had never done during a musical performance in the history of the show. He crossed his arms. He watched Willie Nelson play. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Willie Nelson stopped playing after the first verse. Not because something was wrong, because something was right. He stopped and he looked out at the fourth row, and he spoke into the microphone in the unhurried way he speaks. The voice of a man who has been talking to audiences for 70 years and has long since stopped needing to perform the act of speaking. He said, "There is a man in this room whose father repaired this guitar in 1990. His name was Mac Caldwell. He was a luthier in Nashville. He had a workshop above a hardware store. He told me something about this guitar that I have never told anyone." The studio was completely silent. He said, "He told me this guitar was not finished. He said it still had something in it that it hadn't said yet. He made me promise to play it until one of us gave out first." He paused. He said, "Mac Caldwell died last spring. He was 91 years old, and I want his son Thomas to know." He stopped. He looked at the fourth row. He said, "I want you to know that your father was right. This guitar is not finished. I have kept the promise, and I intend to keep keeping it for as long as I'm able, because your father looked at this old broken thing and told me it still had something to say, and that is the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me, because he wasn't talking about the guitar." Thomas Caldwell stood up from the fourth row. He was 61 years old. A plain and solid man, his father's build, his father's patience visible in the way he held himself. He was not crying. He was the kind of man whose emotion lives in stillness rather than display. And he was very still, looking at Willie Nelson on the stage with the expression of someone receiving something they had not known they needed until the moment it was given. Jimmy Fallon was sitting on the edge of the desk, and he was not managing anything on his face. He was openly, completely, without any professional distance, in tears. Not the polite kind that can be attributed to dust or tiredness, but the real kind. The kind that arrive when something beautiful and true has just been said in a room you happen to be in, and your body does not see the point of pretending otherwise. He looked at the audience, and he had nothing. He shook his head. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth for a moment, and he shook his head again. Willie Nelson looked at Thomas Caldwell. He said, "This next one's for your dad." He began to play. He played without stopping. He played the first song, and then the second, and then one more that had not been planned. An old one, quiet and slow. The kind that sounds like it was written for exactly this room, on exactly this night, for exactly these people, even though it was written 50 years ago in a different life. He played it the way Mac Caldwell had told him to play, like the guitar still had something in it, like it was not finished. The audience did not make a sound until the last note. Then 300 people stood up, and the standing ovation was not for the performance, or not only for the performance, it was for the promise kept. It was for Mac Caldwell above the hardware store. It was for the guitar with the hole worn through the top and 40 years of signatures on the body. It was for the specific and irreplaceable thing that happens when someone looks at something old and broken and loved and says, "It's not done yet. It still has something in it." Questlove played the final note of the outro and let it sustain, and then he set down his sticks and stood. 2 camera operators were not looking through their viewfinders. The director in the control room did not call for commercial for 11 minutes. Thomas Caldwell drove back to Whites Creek, Tennessee that night. He sat at his father's workbench in the workshop at the back of the house, the tools still where Mac Caldwell had left them, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil still present. The way smells persist in rooms longer than the people who made them, and he stayed there for a long time. Willie Nelson sent a photograph the following week. It was taken by the Tonight Show's production photographer that evening, Willie Nelson on the stage with Trigger across his knee, mid-song. The hole in the soundboard visible, the name on the body legible, signed in the corner in Willie Nelson's handwriting. Below the signature, one line, for Mac, who knew it wasn't finished. Thomas Caldwell had it framed and hung it on the wall above his father's workbench, where Mac Caldwell had repaired broken things for 77 years. The guitar is still not finished. Willie Nelson is still playing it. Some things are not done when they look done. Some things have more in them than anyone can see from the outside. It takes a certain kind of person to look at something old and worn and loved and know the difference between finished and resting, between a wound and a story, between an instrument that is broken and an instrument that has simply been played by someone who meant it. Mac Caldwell was that kind of person. Willie Nelson has been proving him right ever since.